question is, are you ready?
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let me talk to you.
Throwdown Nation, we are live. It is a Monday night. We are rolling on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter/X, on Facebook, and on Twitch. It is episode 164 of the Throwdown. I'm your host, Matt, and tonight we are throwing down with undeniably a legend in the wrestling business, a guy who defines the term well-traveled, a guy who truly has wrestled nearly everywhere there is to wrestle, including WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, Dragon Gate, the list goes on, and is currently working the indies and being featured in MLW, the one and only King of Controversy, Austin Aries. How you doing tonight?
Good, Matt. How are you? Looking forward to this.
Man, I've been looking forward to this as well. Man, I have enjoyed the conversations that we've had in DM. I've really been enjoying that and been looking forward to just chewing the fat with you.
Yeah, man. And just so you know, I went live on my Instagram. I got my phone just set up right here, just to go live on my Instagram, so that anyone who's not following you can follow me, and then they can go over to follow you. Is that cool?
Oh, that's great. That's great. Absolutely, man. And for the
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, for everybody that's watching this live, if you have questions or comments, just throw them in the chat, and we'll either handle them as we go or do a little Q&A at the end.
Perfect. For all my Instagram followers who are joining, I'm hopping on live right now, the Throwdown with Matt. So go and check it out. You can find it on Instagram, on Twitch, on YouTube, on all the platforms. But I'm going to have my little phone going here just so people can see me while I'm talking to you. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you reached out maybe after one of my Instagram lives where I was just talking about some, real world stuff. And I think you sent me a message, and that's how we connected, and that's how we ended up here.
Right. Yeah. It was actually right after the Charlie Kirk incident.
Right.
And I just dug what you were saying. And yeah, I mean, I just felt like, that we were kind of on the same wavelength about stuff like that. And I just thought, well, what the heck? Let's see if he's interested in coming on. So
yeah.
Anyway.
And now here we are. And so, I appreciate that. And I guess, for me, it's sometimes I need a reminder that we can actually do valuable, useful things with social media, because so much of it's wrapped up in the ego, and there's so much noise.
It is.
It's, divisive.
It is.
And so I get these reminders when I do put myself out there a little bit, that there's some value to be extracted from that. And just you kind of connecting with me, and now us to, sit here and have a nice little chat for the evening is proof of that.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. And Forrest8787 over in the Instagram chat says that you called him a moron on Instagram once, but he still respects you.
Well, was he being a moron? Was he being a moron? Because I call it like I see it.
Um, I don't know. You'll have to ask him that.
Hey, and to be fair, we've all been a moron a time or two in our life, myself included. Right, well, we've all got to wear that badge at some point.
Guilty.
Yeah. I always like to say, being smart enough to know that you're not always that smart, that's the zone you want to be in. I often say the people that are fooled the most are the ones that think they're too smart to be fooled. Those are the
Yep.
easiest people to fool. A lot of them happen to be
sure.
wrestling fans.
So, we'll go ahead and start with kind of the first and the most obvious question. I mean, I tend to think most people that have followed your career probably have a fairly good idea of the answer to this, but how long in total have you been wrestling?
This is year 25. So I started my training, I think it was June or July of the year 2000. And then I had my first match in November of 2000. So quarter of a century, as we turn into November of actually wrestling matches. And it kind of blows my mind because I don't feel that old. And it's like, where did the time go? And the older we get, the faster it seems the time starts going,
Tell me about it. I mean, I just turned 56, so I mean, you and I are kind of somewhat contemporaries age-wise, and yeah, it's the older you get, the faster it goes.
Yeah, I feel like just because you're a little before me, I'm kind of like the last generation that is that bridge of technology to where I still remember phones that were on the wall, and the television, you had to turn the dial. And I saw the this kind of coming of age of technology where computers started to become a thing once I got into college, and all of a sudden like the first flip phone and all these things that a lot of kids now, they're in their 20s or even their 30s. That's the world they grew up in. And so I always remind people when I started out wrestling, I couldn't Google where a wrestling school was. You didn't have all the information at your fingertips. You kind of had to know somebody who knew somebody, and then also then to network, you couldn't put your match up on YouTube or your social media. You had to go hop in your car and drive to all the places that will let you come and wrestle just to kind of make your name and to network and to meet people. So I've seen this transition now in my career and what technology has done, both the good and the bad.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's funny. My son has never lived in a world without Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
and I've tried to explain the concept of dial-up to him, and he just looks at me like I just got off the mothership. But
Yep. It's the truth. It's the truth. It's a different world, and again, tools aren't inherently good or bad. It's how we use them. And technology is the same way. It's not inherently a good or a bad thing, but how the people that use them, that will determine the value that it brings humanity.
Absolutely. So, in terms of the early portions of your professional wrestling training, what was the most challenging aspect of professional wrestling for you to wrap your mind and body around?
It wasn't really anything physical. It was how business was done. And it's something I'm still trying to wrap my head around just as a global thing. These certain sayings like, well, it's just business, which means when it comes to business, we can put our principles aside. We can put our integrity to the side because, it's just business. What I had a hard time navigating was how business in this business is done, how wrestlers are treated, how promoters do their business, the lack of transparency, the lack of respect, the lack of honesty, chewing people up and spitting them out, taking advantage of people. That for me, by far has been the hardest part of my career, is to navigate that. I believe that there's right or wrong, and there's a right way to treat people, and then there's a wrong way to treat people. There's a right way to do business, and there's a wrong way to do business. And I haven't always been aligned with the way that the professional wrestling business has gone about it.
Right, right. So, I'm presuming, because the majority of the guests that I've had on the show have been at least fans of this stuff the majority of their lives.
Sure.
So what would you say is your earliest wrestling related memory?
Oh, I remember it quite well. Up to about age 4, I was big in the Army, right? Both my grandfathers served in their respective wars. My uncles both were in Vietnam. So I, as a kid, up to about age 4, I loved GI Joe. I had all the GI Joe toys and the tanks, and
Oh yeah.
right, I had all that stuff. And then I remember one Saturday morning I saw AWA wrestling, and first time I ever seen it, and it just hooked me. And from that point on, all the GI Joe toys went away, and I started collecting the wrestlers and the old Remco, from the mid
Oh
'80s
yeah.
Remco figures, all the AWA ones, and that was it. And that just kind of became it was like my secret passion, because it wasn't something that you really told people about, because there weren't many other people that liked wrestling, right? So but yeah, it was just something I always followed, all the magazines, knew all the guys that were even in the smaller promotions, and I grew up liking wrestling, like the old dirty
Mm-hmm.
wrestling. WWF at the time, it was okay, but it just felt different, right? It felt a little too cartoony, a little too over the top, right? As we've seen now, it's become sports entertainment. I
Yeah.
like the AWA, the World Class Championship Wrestling, and I grew up watching the NWA on the Superstation TBS, and that'll always be
Oh
wrestling.
yeah.
And so my first 2 live events I ever went to, and it was really the only 2 live events I ever went to until I actually got in the business, was at the old Mecca Arena in Milwaukee. And I remember the first time I went, I believe it was Hulk Hogan versus Black Jack Lanza and Bobby Heenan in a cage.
Nice.
And like Ray Stevens was on the card, and Jesse Ventura. And so that was my real first exposure to wrestling. And I just followed it, up until college. And then once I got to college, I kind of fell out of it a little bit. You get your fake ID, you start discovering girls, and the wrestling
Oh
kind of
yeah.
gets put to the side. But then wrestling had its big boom, right? The Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era. And then everybody was a wrestling fan,
Oh
and
yeah.
so it really became part of the culture. And I, at the time, my freshman year of college, sophomore year of college, I worked at a liquor store, and we
Mm-hmm.
would do deliveries. Right. So I would drive around the truck and do deliveries in Winona, Minnesota, where I went to college. And I remember every Monday night I was delivering kegs to all these frat houses, because they were having their Monday night wrestling parties almost every
Oh
week.
yeah.
Everyone's in there chopping their crotch and telling everybody to suck it. And I was a little
Yeah.
salty. So I was like, "You guys are fair weather pro wrestling fans. Like, do you know who Mil Mascaras is? Because if you don't, you're not a real wrestling fan in my book."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like you, I grew up in the territory days. My fandom started as an 11-year-old kid in Central Florida, watching the old Florida Championship Wrestling with Gordon Soley doing the commentary.
Yep.
And the first feud that I remembered seeing as a kid was Dusty Rhodes and Kevin Sullivan. And when you're 11, Kevin Sullivan's a scary dude. You find
Yeah. Oh,
out
yeah.
later the man was a complete sweetheart behind the scenes, but I mean,
Sure.
but he had the whole satanic gimmick going on at the time, and
Yep.
like I said, when you're 11, that's some heavy stuff.
It sure is. It sure is. Yeah. No doubt about it. Kevin Sullivan was one of a kind for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So, at what point in your life did your fandom kind of flip and you started to think, I think I could actually do this? Was there a particular point that kind of everything turned, or was it just kind of a gradual progression, or?
It really wasn't even that. So I went to college as a baseball player. I was a pretty good baseball player growing up, left-handed pitcher, speedy center fielder. And so that's why I went to Winona State University, was to play baseball. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, I would say fortunately, or one way or the other, my first day on campus, I got my fake ID. I found myself in the bar scene, and I actually never played baseball. I made the team, but I quit before the season started. And I lasted about 2 years at college before I realized, like, this isn't really for me. There was no job I could think of that I would want to do where I would need a degree. And so and I talk about in my book, Food Fight, that I did some things that were maybe not exactly legal as I left college to make money, trying to figure out a way to make some scratch. And then a childhood friend called me up and he said, hey, I'm up in Minneapolis, just a couple hours from you. And I asked him, well, what are you doing up there? He says, oh, I'm training to be a pro wrestler. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you're trained to be like, was it like a pro wrestling school? Because again, there's no internet, right? You can't just look this up. And he said, yeah, there's a little camp up here with Eddie Sharkey. And I knew the name Eddie Sharkey because he trained the Road Warriors and Rick Rude and all these guys from Minnesota. So I knew the name and I was like, all right, like, I'm not calling you a liar, but I got to come check this out for myself. So I drove up the next week. And so the moment you're talking about, I walked in this little garage and I saw this 16-foot ring in there and a couple of guys in the ring doing some stuff. And it was like, in that moment, I was just like, oh, this is real. Like, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And so from that moment, I saw that this was an actual thing that existed. I remember begging. It was Eddie Sharkey and Terry Fox. I begged him, like, please, can I just get in the ring? And Terry said, nope, you got to sign a waiver. It's $3,000. I was like, oh man, my heart sank because I was like, Terry, I got like $500 to my name if I scrape up every penny that I have. And he's just kind of looking at me. I said, listen, I'll give you half of what I have right now, and I promise I'll pay you as much as I can every week. And he kind of looks me up and down. And he goes, let me think about it for a minute. And he walks away. And I go over to my buddy. I was like, hey, man, if he goes for this, can I move up on your couch? And he's like, yeah, no problem. So about 15, 20 minutes later, Terry comes over to me and goes, so you really want to do this, huh? I said, Terry, honestly, more than anything else in my entire life, like, I didn't even know this like existed. Like, this is what I want to do. And he goes, all right, you got yourself a deal. And that was it. And so a week later, I moved up on my buddy's couch. I, packed up my car and gave Terry half my money. And that was it. I started. And there was no GoFundMe. There was no crowdfunding. So I started giving plasma twice a week because I could make like, I think it was like $25 the first time and then $35 if you came back the second time in a week. So that was $60 a week. And then I started working temp service jobs, 5 a.m. doing like hard labor for I think it was like $7.25 an hour, just to make some money so I could pursue the dream, living on my buddy's couch until I could find a better job. And so I tell that story because nowadays a lot of people say I really want this. But when it comes down to actually putting the action behind it and putting the work behind it, maybe they don't want it as bad as they think they did, And so,
right.
And a lot of people that are successful in this, it's because they embrace the grind, and it never felt like work, not a day in my life, because putting those hours in is what allowed me to go to camp, at 5 o'clock and go do something that was awesome. So I didn't mind doing the parts that weren't so great as long as I got to do the parts that I really loved.
Absolutely. So, I know that you are a vegan and have been for some time.
Yeah.
What actually led you to embrace that lifestyle?
Yeah, well, and I always like to distinguish, like, veganism isn't a diet. It's a lifestyle. It's a philosophy of life. And so, for me, I don't like causing suffering. I don't like to hurt things that feel and that think and that have emotion. I certainly don't like to pay somebody else to abuse them or slaughter them. And when I made that connection and I realized that I had a choice to not do that, I couldn't think of a good reason not to. And so, I go back and I talk about this in my book, Food Fight, and I'm going to send you a copy as we talked about it when we're done here. I grew up in Wisconsin. My grandparents had a farm. My dad grew up on a farm. And I remember at an early age, probably about 7 or 8, I was feeding grass to the cow through the fence and had this moment where we were like staring at each other's eyes. Like, this cow's like this far from me and its feet, and we're like staring at each other. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder what the cow's thinking right now. Like, because we're having this moment. And I know we don't speak the same language, but we're having this connection of two like sentient beings. And so that was the first realization that, oh, this cow thinks something. It feels something.
Yeah.
It has emotion. It has thoughts. Maybe we can't communicate. And then, of course, it was dinner time. And what were we eating? Hamburgers and brats and the good old Wisconsin diet. And I made the connection, and it didn't feel right. And so, but at that age, you eat what you're told, and you eat what everybody else around you eat, and you don't question it. And so when I got off on my own after college, the guy actually, when I was doing this kind of semi-legal, somewhat not illegal activity, these guys had a custom blown glass company. So they were making custom bongs for like rock stars and athletes and whatever. And so I was traveling with this guy that was basically the hype man. And I remember we were driving in, I think it was like Arizona or Texas. And he's like, hey man, like red meat and pork's really not good for you. And he like kept hammering this home from a health standpoint. Red meat and pork's not good for you. And I never thought of it I never thought about that. Like, you don't question the things you eat, because if things weren't good for us, why would they let us eat them? If things weren't good for us, why would the overseen entities like the FDA or like, why would they let these things be marketed and sold to us if they were bad for us? They would never do that, right? Like they're there to protect us.
Well, yeah, but we're the government. We're here to help.
Yeah,
right?
they're here to help you, right? Yeah, that's how we pay them. We pay them to serve us, right? So then I start doing a little bit of research. I start digging into it, and I'm like, well, shit, like maybe this stuff isn't so good for me. But then it wasn't even just the meat. Then it got into like, oh, wow, it's all these other things. It's the, laboratory made fake sugars and the petroleum based fake colors and the preservatives. And like, as I kept peeling back layers, I kept realizing, holy shit, like almost nothing is good for you that they tell you. Like everything that's advertised and marketed to me is bad for me. So it really started from that standpoint, because I've always been like, I would think of myself as like a rebel, as like, excuse my language, but like fuck the system kind of guy. Right. And so I realized, well, the most rebellious thing you can do is detach yourself from the system that wants you sick, stupid, and sad as quickly as possible. So from a health standpoint, I changed my diet. But then as I started really understanding how this food got there and how the animals are treated and made that connection, I just eventually took it at the next step, and I cut out, and I went completely vegan lifestyle. So I cut out all the dairy, all the eggs, all the meat. I stopped buying leather. I was very conscious about the decisions I made as a consumer, because I didn't want to support an industry or pay people to do something I couldn't do myself. And I couldn't slit the throat of a cow or a pig or a dog or a cat. I couldn't skin it. I couldn't fur it. I couldn't do these things. It's not in my makeup. And so I didn't want to be a coward and pay somebody else to do something that I couldn't do for myself.
Yeah. Gotcha. That makes all the sense in the world.
I really do. So. Like, I really do believe like one of the greatest deceptions and one of the things that's holding humanity from really leveling up consciously is this idea that anything that we think is beneath us, we can take domain over and do whatever we want to it. Right. And so, we talk a lot about racism these days. Racism is this thing that's constantly being thrown in our face. But I like to say, like, the first form of discrimination that we're all taught as humans is speciesism. Meaning, if it's a dog, we love it and it's our best friend. But if it's a pig, we slit its throat and we make bacon out of it. If it's a cat, we cuddle with it. If it's a cow, we kill it and make hamburgers. So we're taught at a really early age that we start discriminating over the things that we see value in and the things that we don't see value in, the things that we love and the things that we turn into commodities. And then that spills over into how we treat one another as humans. But the first place that we're taught discrimination is speciesism. These animals we love, these animals, fuck them. We don't care.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of food for thought there. Pardon the pun.
No, and Matt, and the whole point of it is, and why I share my story, why I talk about it, why I wrote my book, is because we're taught to think this is a necessity. So when we think something is a necessity that we have to do to survive, then we frame the moral compass around it differently than if we say, well, no, it's actually not a necessity. 25 years, I haven't eaten any animals. I'm in pretty good shape. I look pretty young for my age. I can still perform at a high level. I'm 47 years old. So I'm proof it's not a necessity. It's a choice. So now when you remove something that I need to do this until I just like to do this, now morally it's framed completely different, right? I'm not, listen, if you have to do this to survive, that changes the rules of engagement. But for the world that we live in, almost anybody who's watching or listening to this has the resources and capabilities to choose not to do that, and they can still thrive. So now it's not, now it's not a necessity, it's a choice. And now you have to look at it morally differently.
Got you. So shift of topics here. This is a question I've actually been really interested to bounce off of you.
Yeah.
And this is from, several years ago, during the time after they got released from WWE. There was a span of time where EC3 and Adam Scherr were working on something called the Control Your Narrative project.
Right. Yep.
And I was actually always really intrigued by the concept, and it never really seemed to get beyond being a conceptual thing. But I know that your name was attached to that.
Sure.
I know it was EC3's baby, and I'm not asking you to necessarily speak for him, but from your perspective, what was that going to be?
So the way I saw it really initially was, once EC3 was kind of on his own after he left, probably WWE his second time, right? I really thought the original concept was just a way for him to kind of rebrand himself. Right. And so that was, I thought, the original vehicle. And from that, it kind of took a life of its own. And as he brought other people into this idea, it started to grow, and then, as you said, Adam Scherr, came in. And so I don't think it's interesting because this thing just kind of took a life of its own. And I don't think that the original concept was ever to be a promotion or a wrestling company. It just kind of kept evolving, right? And as new people came in, you all of a sudden you had a lot of cooks in the kitchen and had some different ideas of what the recipe should be or what we were trying to bake or what we were trying to cook. It happens all the time.
Right.
We did run some events. There was, we filmed some stuff that came out. So I just think it was kind of a victim of, like, there was never, even out of the original conception, there wasn't like a clear idea of what it was or wasn't supposed to be. And as it kind of took a life of its own, again, what direction are you taking it? And then Adam went back to WWE, and that kind of killed some momentum we had for some things that were maybe about to come to fruition. And then EC3 kind of went a different direction, and it was an interesting point in time. I liked the concept. JC was another guy behind the scenes who had a lot of the creative components to that, and the vision for that. And so, he's now developed, and I've been working with him on some other projects that he's been working on that are pretty cool. He takes more of a artistic minded frame when it comes to pro wrestling. But yeah, and then, people need to label things in this day and age, right? People need to put everything or everybody in a box. And so once certain people got aligned, they said, "Oh, well, this is what this is. It's a MAGA company. It's a this, it's a that." And it's like, it really wasn't any of those things, but most people think in very simplistic terms, right? They paint with big, broad brushes. They don't know nuance. They don't understand any depth. They've been taught that everything in life is black or white, red or blue, pro or anti, my side, your side. And that's how they think everyone fits in one of these two boxes. You're either on my team or you're on the other gang's team, right? And especially if you believe in the political theater, and it's so funny that people don't understand that, in my opinion, politics is pro wrestling. They pretend there's these two sides.
Absolutely.
There's these two sides that are fighting each other. And when the show's over, they go get paid by the same very entities. Right?
Yep.
That's all it is. It's a show. And if you don't understand it's a show, and that listen, if I tell you every 4 years you have a choice, Matt, would you like to eat peas or carrots? And the ruse is this: the peas and the carrots come from the same farmer. So he doesn't care which one you pick because he wins either way. And then now everyone, then 4 years later, I say, well, now you have a choice. What would you like for dinner, peas or carrots? And then 4 years after that, I say, okay, now you have a choice for dinner. Would you like carrots or peas? How many years in a row do you have to pick between peas and carrots before you realize you're not really being given a choice, because the peas and the carrots come from the same farm, and all that the peas and the carrots agree on is that no other vegetable gets to be a choice. And now everyone sits here back and forth yelling, well, no, it's peas because peas have more protein in them. It's got to be peas. And people are like, no, it's carrots. Carrots help you see at night. And while all the people are arguing back and forth over peas or carrots, the farmer's just collecting his money and he's just sitting back and he's and that's politics.
Absolutely. Anymore, there's no such thing as an election. It's a selection.
Sure. They already
and the Republican and Democrat Party are two sides of a very, very thin coin. I mean, anymore, it's basically a uniparty.
Listen, if you go to see a movie, I have to give you a good guy and a bad guy. If you go to watch a wrestling match, you need a good.
You got to have a heel and a face.
Okay. Now, who you think's the good guy and who you think's the bad guy is going to be based on your own personal perception of your life and your influences in your life. But there's no good movie where it's two good guys, because then who are they fighting against? This is politics. They give you these strong characters that emotionally make you act emotionally instead of logically. And so I don't care.
Absolutely.
People that say Donald Trump's the worst person ever, he's the Antichrist, you're being worked. And the people over here say Donald Trump's the solution, he's the answer, he's going to make America great again, you're being worked. If you believe in this shit, either way, I'm sorry, you're being worked. And so many people now are just puppets on a string, getting their emotions played with back and forth, blaming each other for a system that's corrupt and broken, that's never fixed a problem a day in its life.
Absolutely, man. I'm completely in agreement with you. So, as we're both getting older.
Speak for yourself.
I know.
I'm reverse aging over here. It's all those turnips I eat.
Yeah. So, I know that the physical side within professional wrestling is definitely important, but as we get older, the priorities change.
Sure.
And at this point, what exercise in particular do you feel is most pertinent to keeping Austin Aries? Is there a particular exercise that you think really is helping at this point in your life?
I'm not sure it's like one exercise in particular, but I think it's just changing the philosophy of what I'm trying to accomplish when I'm in the gym, when I'm training. And so at this point, I'm not trying to put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle. I'm not trying to set, I'm not trying to set new records in my personal records and bench or squat. It's about keeping my mobility, keeping my fluidity, keeping my athleticism, my flexibility. These are things that are important. So I'm training to be more like an athlete now, to make sure that I can still move the way I want to move. And that means, sometimes it means that I'm doing less static exercise and I'm trying to do more movement exercises, that I'm doing higher reps and lower weights. I will say one exercise that I've started doing that I really, really love. I call it a pull punch. And so it's like a low cable. I'll take a low cable pulley and I'll start by pulling it here and then switching hands and pivoting into a punch. And so I'm really using this whole body movement. So I'm getting a pull here and then I'm getting a punch here, but it's using this nice fluidity and explosive movement that I would really use in a strike. And so that's a great core exercise, but it's really hitting everything. It's hitting my core, it's hitting my lat, it's hitting my arms, it's hitting my chest on the punch and the shoulders. It really hits everything, and it's a great warm-up or it's a great finisher. So that's one that I've really been doing. And then, you know, then just getting into things like yoga and things like that, where again, you're slowing down a little bit and you're being kind to your joints and your tendons, because those have taken a lot of abuse. And, you know, and then again, work on that flexibility and the fluidity and the athleticism to make sure that, you know, I don't want to get too stiff and bulky, because again, you know, I really think that, you know, one of the keys that's helped me stay healthy, especially with my style, is just being kind of limber, you know. And if you get folded up in
Mm-hmm.
half, or you take a, you know, you get slammed and it maybe doesn't go quite right, you're not tearing muscles, or you're not, you know, doing things to your joints and your tendons.
Absolutely. So, outside of wrestling, what person inspires you the most and why?
Oh man, that's a great question. You know, I don't know if it's a person. It's just it's people I just come in contact with, whether it's even via social media or people I run through. You know, a lot of us, you know, in our world, like, you know, our problems are huge and so paramount, right? And then you meet people that have really overcome just amazing things, showing amazing
Mm-hmm.
strength. Like, I'll tell you a story. I spoke at, you know, I'll speak at like Veg Fest or things like that, you know, and talk about my journey. And I was at my table afterwards selling books, and this kid came up to me. He had one of my old TNA shirts on, and
Nice.
he's like, you know, Austin, you know, I've been a fan of you for a long time, since I was really small. He's like, and I just want to tell you, you know, my whole family is like really overweight, really obese, and because of you, I changed my diet and I went plant based, and I've lost over 200 pounds.
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
so like that hit me more than any, like, oh, my favorite match of yours was this, or like, this kid, just because of maybe me sharing what worked for me, he decided to take that on and he changed his life, right? He took a different path than
Mm-hmm.
everybody else around him, and literally was kind of almost predestined to go over here and be unhealthy and not have a very healthy life or happy life. And just by me sharing me, he took that and inspired him to do this, and he put the work in and he changed his life, right? um Stories like that, people I meet like that have really overcome. um you know, there's this kid Steven who does a lot of, I've done a podcast to his, and he's got like some rare disease and he's not letting them stop him, he's overcoming it. There's a huge fan of mine in the UK, Tanya, you know, who's fights some disabilities and some health problems, and you know what, like, she shows up every day, she goes to these events because it's the one thing that brings her joy, but like, she doesn't stop. They don't give up, they don't quit. And so it's a reminder of how lucky and blessed most of us are at the end of the day, you know. And you see, you meet these people like someone like Chris Bay, right? You know, someone who was, you
Yeah.
know, an athlete and fit, and we just see how quickly just one inch the wrong way completely can change your
Yep.
life. And it reminded me not to take, not, you know, not to take for granted that I can get up and walk to the refrigerator and grab a snack, because a lot of times we do these things every day
Absolutely.
that we don't appreciate. We're not grateful. We take them for granted, you know. And so it's people like that inspire me and remind me how grateful I am and how lucky I've been, you know. And so and again, I've been lucky enough to travel the world and meet people that I'll talk about a guy, the honey shaman that I met in Mexico. And he was the honey shaman, and he invited us into his home, and by all Western standards, we'd say he had nothing, because he had no material goods. He lived in a dirt hut, and he had, you know, like, and this guy was the happiest guy you would ever meet. He was so grateful for everything he
Yeah.
had. He was so grateful and like excited to bring us into his home and share what he had with us. You know, or when I was in India and went to this small village where none of them had cell phones or Wi-Fi, and they were all doing their job for their village to contribute. You know, some people were doing the hunting, some people were making the clothes, some people were getting the water, some people were building the shelter, and they were some of the happiest people I've met, because they weren't constantly being reminded every day on their phone that they weren't enough and that they didn't have
Yep.
enough. You see, contentment doesn't drive consumerism. And so in this world, in the Western world, in the United States especially, we're constantly being told that we shouldn't be content with what we have, because the minute we become content, we stop consuming things we don't need.
Yep.
So we're constantly being reminded you're not enough, your house isn't big enough, your car's not new enough, your girlfriend's not hot enough, your job doesn't pay you enough, you're not skinny enough. Every day, you're not enough, because that's what drives you to keep searching for these external things to fill those voids that are always internal. So it's the people that have overcome real struggle or that don't quit when they haven't been dealt a fair hand, that those people inspire me.
Absolutely. So UK Paul on Twitch mentions one of his favorite moments of yours is the Bully Ray Hulk Hogan option C moment.
Yeah. It was, option C was a real thing. I kind of posed the question, do I want to just toss the title away for a world title shot? It kind of makes the X Division title, it kind of cheapens it, right? And that was one of the things that kind of built TNA. So I just kind of threw the idea out, like, what if we do this every year? So now every year at Destination X, and that was my idea, was now every year at Destination X, whoever happens to be the X Division champion has a chance at the world title. Now they've changed it a little bit over the years, as always happens in wrestling, but that was my original idea. Because now, leading up to Destination X, the X Division title becomes almost the most important title, because it does open that door for the opportunity, and elevates guys. It's funny. I say only in wrestling do the weight classes determine who's on the top of the card or the bottom of the card, right? Exactly. If you think about boxing, or if you think about MMA, hardly ever are the heavyweights the main event draw. Floyd Mayweather's never been a heavyweight. Conor McGregor's never been a heavyweight. These guys were the main draws. But in pro wrestling, because of one old man's opinion, if you weren't the heavyweight, then you were less than, right? And you were always pigeonholed as less than, because you weren't the heavyweight. Yet in every other combat sport, it didn't matter. It was whoever was the most entertaining and whoever the fans wanted to pay to see. But in pro wrestling, we would tell them, well, no, these guys aren't as good because they're smaller. Exactly. So the X Division was one of these things that opened the door for guys that could be entertaining and that could compete at a world-class level to break through that and still be on the top of the card. And so I've always told people, like, I've been a world heavyweight champion. I've never been a heavyweight a day in my life. I'm a world champion, because I'm world class, not because of my size. Yeah.
Right. And, it's funny. When I was of the age that I could have potentially considered going into the business, it was still completely the land of the giants.
Sure.
And, I'm a comparatively small guy. So, it does my heart good to see the smaller, really athletic guys making a go of it now, because we're in a different world where, the size doesn't matter the way it used to. And, it's, and like you said, the X Division may not be the most, air quotes, important division, but it's the coolest.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
and if you even think back to, WCW, when they were at their peak, they had the NWO,
the cruiserweights,
and they had these things, but a lot of people tuned in to see the cruiserweights. A lot of people tuned in to see Dean Malenko and Chris Jericho and Psychosis and all these guys. That was the excitement. But again, pro wrestling it's a variety show.
It is.
It's a variety show. So you want to give people variety. And so, size doesn't matter, but I would counter that to say, but if your whole roster is all 5'9", 5'10", 175 pounds, that's not any better than if they're all 6'4", 350, right? And so I think that it needs to be a variety. And, and again, I've always said this, like, I'm not naive to this fact, but if you're going to have your world heavyweight champion walk on the Tonight Show, I might not be the guy that you want to represent you, because most people, when you look at me, you go, what, you're a pro wrestler? You're not big enough, because they've been ingrained with this idea that to be a pro wrestler, you have to be Hulk Hogan. Right.
Yeah.
And I get that. Right. And, so for the illusion of this, that yeah, like big men have their place too. And
Oh, for sure.
my whole thing was, if we're gonna have weight divisions, then stick to them. Then use them.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean the heavyweight's
Yep.
at the top. Listen, if the middleweight guy's far more exciting and entertaining, then he's your main event. Just like in boxing, just like in MMA. But the minute you go, oh, well, the X division is for guys that are 205 and under, but then you go, but AJ Styles is too good, so we're going to put him in the heavyweight division, or Jeff Hardy's too good, we're going to put him in the heavyweight division. Well, no, he's not a heavyweight. Just have that division be your main event, because that's where your best guys are, just like they do it in every other legitimate sport. And that was always my argument.
Exactly.
It's like you have these weight limits or weight divisions, and you don't actually stick to them.
Yep. So what is your biggest in-ring pet peeve?
My biggest in-ring pet peeve. Oh boy. I mean, I don't know if I have one necessarily. I'm trying to think of things that, I don't know. I mean, I guess, the biggest thing is like, I still believe that the magic is in making it feel real, even if people think they know it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's still magic in treating it like it's real, even if people think it's not. I'll say, like, I take pride in the fact that some things that I've done and some very controversial things I've done have made people believe in the magic. You can take Bound for Glory, for example, that to this day, people still think this was a shoot, and me and John had heat, and I, did all these things on my own. And that's the magic, is you make people, I know they say this isn't real, but I don't know. It's like, I laugh because, a lot of the wrestling fans think they're really smart, and they go, oh, we know it's not real. We know pro wrestling's a work. We know it's fake. But when Austin Aries does it, well, then it's real. That guy's really a prick in real life. Like, you've never met me in real life, man. You have no idea.
Exactly.
I might just be a really good actor. I might just be a really convincing actor, And so my biggest pet peeve is like, it's like, if you're a magician, and I use this one a lot when I do seminars, we all know the magician's not really sawing the lady in half. I think we can all agree on that at this point. Nobody thinks the magician is legitimately sawing the lady in half. We all know it's fake. But the magician doesn't remind you throughout the show by his performance or by winking at you that his magic is bullshit. And I feel like a lot of the wrestling nowadays, in the way that it's done, and it's funny, haha, and we all know it's not real. But why do you got to keep reminding him?
Exactly.
Because if the magician's on stage and he's telling me, wow, this magic's not really magic, then why would I keep paying my money to go watch him? If he doesn't take his craft seriously enough to respect it and respect himself, then why should I? And so what I think happened over the years that I've been wrestling is there was a lot of shitty magicians in pro wrestling that really couldn't do the tricks very well. And their response to that was, instead of learning how to do the tricks better, they would say, well, everyone knows magic's not real. Stop judging me on how good I do the trick. Well, that's the whole point, though. The magic's supposed to be real. And when you expose it, you're killing the business.
Yeah. Kind of like with this this Netflix documentary, Unreal, that WWE did, sort of pulling back the curtain, so to speak. I mean, I found it interesting just, because I was already smartened up to a lot of stuff. So seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff was cool, but at the same time, I felt like the show gave away too much, I mean, everybody knows that, it's predetermined. The outcomes are predetermined,
Yeah.
but I hate the fake word, because I know the punishment, the physical punishment you guys go through to do these matches. It is not fake, but
Right.
and I just feel like they went too far with that series, as far as exposing too much of the backstage machinations and everything else. But
I can't speak to that because I haven't seen it. I don't have Netflix. I'll say this, like I think that for me, there's a difference between if we're showing you behind the scenes or things that happen and that's the show, cool. But once the actual act starts, now we need to have the illusion, right?
yeah,
Like we can't
yeah,
in the mid, like if a magician is showing me like how he preps for his magic, again, I don't know why you'd want to give all the magic away. Even it right, I don't know why you'd want to expose all the magic. But there's a difference between having something that maybe shows some behind the scenes of what a magician does to prep compared to once he actually starts his act, while he's in the act of the illusion, he keeps reminding you, oh, by the way, don't forget this isn't real. And that for me is where I have an issue.
Yeah.
I broke in at a time where it was transitioning. I was taught you protect the business, you protect your opponent, and you protect yourself in that order.
Yep.
Protect the business, protect your opponent, protect yourself. And so, maybe I died on that sword, so to speak, because I wouldn't peel the curtain back, or I wouldn't talk to these dirt sheet writers like they were one of the boys. And this is something that maybe a mistake I made early in my career, when a lot of these guys that make money by talking about what's happening behind the scenes, when they would all message me to see if I would be their mole, I told them all to get bent. If they wanted to know what happens in the locker rooms, go train and buy a pair of boots like I did. Right. And so, but that just had a different philosophy. Now, what I learned about that is now when they write the reviews of matches, they're not always going to talk about you in a flattering way. They're always going to put over the guys that are feeding them the information. Right. Those guys get a little half star to a star boost because they're the moles. That's my source. So of course I give my source an extra star, and now he's got 6-star matches, right? Because that's what I give him in return. He gives me the information, and then I tell everyone he's the best wrestler in the world. That's how it works.
Gotcha. Well, like I said at the beginning of this, you have wrestled virtually every place there is to wrestle. And you've wrestled a lot of huge names over the years, but present day or past, who would be a dream opponent that you have yet to share a ring with? Who would Austin Aries love to have the opportunity to share the ring with, present day or past?
I mean, there's present day, like probably one of the few guys left that I haven't had a chance would be Chris Jericho. But as far as past guys, I mean, there's probably just a list, like any of the Four Horsemen, Eddie Guerrero, Roddy Piper, anything involving Bobby Heenan, as my manager. I don't care who I face. As long as Bobby's my manager, I'm happy. Those are probably some of the people off the top of my head, right? And as you said, I've been lucky enough to get in there with guys like Sting and Kurt Angle, Jeff Hardy, some of these guys that are legends in the business. So Sting was probably the most surreal one for me, as someone I grew up with, and then also just never feeling like the company would put us in the ring together. And so I remember that day I got there and I was in the parking lot. He was getting out of his car at the same time. He's like, "Hey, it's you and me tonight." And I kind of laughed. I thought he was just messing with me. He's like, "Oh yeah, it's funny." He's like, "No, I'm serious." I was like, "Wait, what? Like, you and me are wrestling?" Okay. And so, I can imagine, Sting was going to kind of sound funny. He was probably a bit nervous because working some of these younger guys, we learned the craft differently than he did. You know, him and Rick,
Right.
you know, you think him and Rick were calling a bunch of spots in the back before they went out there and did, 60 minutes? I'm going to say probably not. You know, they
No.
walked and they talked and they did it on the fly, and that was the way they learned. So I think he was, man, this kid, this young kid, he's athletic, he's going to want me to remember a bunch of stuff. And I remember going up and said, "Hey man, like this is gonna be really easy tonight. Like I grew up watching you. I know all your stuff. So like, this is going to be really simple. And then we'll just, figure it out. I have a couple of ideas, but like the rest of it, like we're good." And I could just kind of see this relief on his face. Like, "Oh, okay, good." I was like, "Yeah, man, nice and easy." And it was a fun match. It was a fun match.
Yep. So, do you have an all-time favorite match as a fan?
Oh man, I'm one of these weird guys that doesn't have like all-time favorite anythings. I just have I just kind of have like things I liked. I talked about the other day. I put a tweet out, but I remember when the Mulkey brothers won their first match for the Crockett to get in the Jim Crockett Memorial Tag Team Cup, right? Well,
Oh yeah.
Who was it? Like the Gladiators or something? The two masked guys, and like literally just like fell and tripped over the other one. Like, like that's a match. That was an awesome match. I mean, there's just so many like good matches from back then. You can think of, any of the Horsemen stuff from back then, or some of these matches that the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express had, or even like the spectacles of like the scaffold match, which at the time, like the Road Warriors and the Midnight Express and the scaffold match. Going back, I think too, now you've been in the business and you're a little smart to it. You go back and watch some of these guys and you're like, man, these guys were so good. Like guys like Barry Windham, for his size, I think that's a lot of what's missing today in the wrestling, the style of wrestling now is like that timing, making things not look like we already had it planned by spacing and timing. And just, he was a guy who was just so fluid for his size. And I think there's a lot of these guys, we look back now with a trained eye and go, man, these guys were really, really skilled. Adrian Adonis, going back and watching him, we're realizing like Buddy Roberts was like actually the good worker of the Freebirds, out of the three. And that's saying something because Terry Gordy was pretty good himself. So yeah, someone just said here, Savage and Steamboat, right? I mean, that was probably a match that, Savage had everything planned out and Steamboat had to remember it all because that's how Randy liked to do things, right? Yeah, a lot of good matches like that. Or you know what? I was just watching this clips of this other day, like, Joe versus Kobashi, from I was on the show, Ring of Honor, right? And like, seeing that and going back and watching that now and kind of going back and watching a lot of the old Ring of Honor stuff and appreciating what we captured at that time was probably as close as like ECW ever felt. If you were a fan of that, just the way the crowd energy was, I got you, Steve.
I've got to throw this up on the screen real quick. This is actually a comment from my wife over on YouTube, just talking about some of the things that you had to say earlier. You really made an impact on her, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Julia. I appreciate that. And you know what? I think it's really important that people share those messages because we're really quick to share when we don't like something or when something makes us angry or when the company doesn't do the right thing. And I think it's really important for us to feed the stuff we do like, feed what we want to see grow. And so how many times when, Delta gets my baggage to the baggage claim right on time, I don't sit there and thank them on social media. But the one time my bags are delayed for a day, we're really quick to bitch about it, and it's like, so like that message, like Julia, I appreciate that, right? Because the more we keep feeding that and we show that appreciation, the more people are going to be willing to step out and go, okay, that feels good. Let me do that, because we get a lot of hate, we get a lot of negativity. And sometimes it makes people like us, go back in our shell and go, you know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth putting myself out there to get all this hate. But when you see comments like that, that inspires me to go, you know what? keep speaking your truth. Keep putting yourself out there because it's making a difference. Yeah. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Von LaFleur over on the Instagram chat, he's actually a previous guest on the Throwdown.
Okay.
He's an indie wrestler here in Atlanta.
Nice.
And he said you're one of his all-time TNA favorites, and glad you're back, and a big inspiration for the smaller guys. So
not that small, dude. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks, man. No, I appreciate it. Appreciate it, man. Hey, it's you use what you have at your disposal. I always saw I didn't fly off the top rope because I necessarily wanted to. It's just what I had to do to compete with the bigger guys. So you got to use what you got.
Gotcha. So you said you're not a guy that really has absolute favorites of anything, but I will ask. You've wrestled 25 years. You've done a lot of matches, but do you have an all-time favorite match that you have been a part of?
Yeah, but they're like super obscure matches that like probably nobody ever saw or they wouldn't get, right? I wrestled Brian Kendrick out in PWG, and we were both bad guys. And so I remember at the time I was the Ring of Honor champ, and as PWG often did, they bring me out there to lose when I was the Ring of Honor champ. That's what they like to do with me, which is fine. So I say, hey, no problem. As long as I get to do it my way, I've got no problem putting him over, even as the champ. And so,
Gotcha.
So we had this match where we were like, we just tried to out heel each other. So I pulled his hair, he pulled my hair. He choked me, I choked him. I stuck my thumb in his eye, he stuck his thumb in my eye. I tried to use the tights for leverage, he used the tights for leverage. I tried to steal the pin with my feet on the rope, he tried to steal it, right? The whole match was just each back and forth, trying to do every heel tactic back and forth we could. And eventually he crumbles down into the mat and he's holding his leg. He's like, oh, no, I really hurt. Hold on, I really hurt my leg. The old, like, I hurt my leg trick. And I was like, I'm not stupid. I'm not falling from that. Because then you're going to hit me from behind and you're going to start doing jumping jacks. And then I crumbled on the mat and I went, oh no, I hurt my leg. So now we're sitting in opposite corners. You're a liar. I really hurt my leg. No, you're a liar. I really hurt my leg. And we're yelling back and forth. And I remember telling him, I said, let's just sit there as long as we can until people start to get like uncomfortable. Like, Jesus Christ, these guys are going to do it. Because that's my own thing. Like, I always like to kind of screw with the mind. So eventually, the referee, I think it was Rick Knox, he turns to look at the timekeeper's table like, what do I do? These guys are just sitting in these corners yelling back and forth while they hurt each other's leg. Well, the minute he turns his back, Brian pulls a chain out of his knee pad, and I grab the title belt. We charge each other. We hit each other at the same time, and we both get knocked out, and he falls right on top of me, and the ref turns around like, what the hell happened? He counts 1, 2, 3, and that's the Brian Kendrick beat me. And
oh, that's beautiful.
There was like maybe 6 people in the crowd who liked it, and the rest were just mad because we didn't like kill each other and do a bunch of dives and dumb shit for their pleasure. But like, that's like one of my favorite matches I've been a part of.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's
what a great story.
Or I'll tell you another quick one. I had a match out in Australia when I was the belt collector, which, wasn't something I was trying to do. It just happened. And now everyone's trying to do it. And that's cool. Like, more power to it.
Right.
But it wasn't like some big grand plan I have. It just kind of unfolded that way. And so I went out for the second tour for this company out in Australia. And the first night I came out, first or second night, because it was I think it was like a 4 or 5 show tour. I came out in my dress clothes with all my titles, including the Impact World title. And I said, I'm going to make history here tonight. I'm going to do something that nobody's ever done. I said, because I know right now the New Day's fans, they really like to see women being treated as equals. And I'm seeing all these intergender matches. I said, so here tonight, I'm going to, for the first time ever, I'm going to defend the Impact World title against a female. And the crowd got really excited. Like, oh, wow. And they started throwing out names. And I said, my opponent here tonight And I turned and looked, and it was one of the girls that had done my seminar this afternoon, and she was working security. I said, hey, you, stand up on the apron. And everyone's like looking like, oh. It's like, what's your name? She's like, I'm Belle. I said, how many matches have you had, Belle? She said, 4. I said, well, it sounds like to me you're ready for the opportunity of a lifetime. And if you're up for it right here, right now, you can have a shot at the Impact World title. And so there's this kind of like collective groan by the crowd, like, ugh. So she gets in the ring, kind of apprehensive, and we circle around. And now this new breed of wrestling fan has been conditioned to think that the girl has to get something, right? Like she has to get something. But I'm old school, and I'm thinking if you're new to a combat sport and you have like 4 matches experience and you're going up against a world champion, you're probably not going to get anything. So basically, the bell rang. I'm still in my street clothes. We went to lock up. I went right behind her. I threw her on the mat. I spun on her back once. I put her in the submission. She tapped out. I went and held my belts up, and the whole crowd was silent. Like it was like disbelief. Like, you can't do that. And I was just like, I just did. Yeah. And they hated me. I mean, it was just like he's really a bad person. Well, so understand that my philosophy as a heel is I'm going to pull you down as far as I can, because when the time is right and I let go and I finally get what I have coming, the more I can make you hate me, the more I can get under your skin. When the time's right, I can take you that much higher with that joy to finally see Austin Aries get what he deserves. So at the end of the tour, I'm facing Robbie Eagles for the title. And I've been doing all this different, devious, belt switching stuff and, this belt behind the ref's back and that belt, cheating every way I can to keep the title. So here the last night, here I am doing all the stuff around the outside on the floor, and I grab the title belt and I'm measuring up Robbie Eagles to hit him over the head with the belt. And all of a sudden I feel someone tug the title from behind me. And I turn and look, and it's Belle sitting right there in the same position as security guard. Oh, you, how dare you stick your nose in my business? And I snatch her by the ears and I pull her over the guardrail. You want us get in my business? And I pull her in for the brainbuster on the floor. And I pick her up for the brainbuster, and she kicks behind me and she shoves me right into Robbie Eagles' super kick. And he catches me with a super kick.
Nice.
He gives me the splice spread on the ground. He rolls me in. He hits me off the top rope. 1, 2, 3, and he beats me for the title. And everybody, it was like the roof blew off the place. They were all so happy. And so again, the part people miss these days of being the heel is when it's time to give the people what they want. It's always fun in the front end when you get to be a jerk and tell them they suck and get to be an asshole and get under their skin and make them hate you. But then usually when it's time to finally get what you have coming, everyone's like, well, I got to be a strong heel, brother. No, man. The whole point, and this is what I think a lot of people don't understand about my psychology of why I enjoy being a bad guy. In real life, more often than not, unfortunately, the bad guys win. They get away with it.
They do.
Right? The government gets away with cheating you. Right? The banks get away with robbing you. The bad guys win. And so for me, being a heel was this moment where I get to actually give people one of the few times in life where the bad guy gets what he deserves. And some of my greatest moments and my happiest moments in wrestling were me laying on the mat after I just got beat, listening to how happy those people were, knowing that I created that because I made myself so dislikable, so hateable, so awful, so terrible, because I knew in the end when it was time for me to get what I had coming, they were going to love it that much more. And so that's always why it's always been hard for me to be liked. As a kid, I just wanted everybody to like me. And I realized, not everyone's going to like you. That's just how it is. Yep. And so I realized, okay, well, I don't need the adulation of the crowd cheering for me. Like my ego doesn't need that. I got so much more satisfaction out of hearing them cheer for the other guy because he just beat me. And that's why I love being a heel, because I actually like to give people joy. I want to bring joy to their life. And if I can give you more joy by being such a dastardly person, by basically reflecting all the bullshit I see in the world, I'm a mirror of that. And I give that to you. And I become that as the character so that when I finally get what I have coming to me, you get to revel in that joy. You get to be happy for once that, you know what, the bad guy got what he deserved, because we don't get that in everyday life.
No, we don't. We don't. And, glancing over at the Instagram chat, Eric X Black, who is also a previous guest on the Throwdown. He is a masked wrestler in the Philadelphia area.
Nice.
Really good dude. Glad to see him showing up for this. So, and again, you've been doing this long enough. This may be a little hard to narrow down, but what would you say is the worst bump you have taken in your career?
That's going to be an easy one.
Okay.
Yeah. So I worked with Colt Cabana.
Okay.
And he had this move where he would have you in a fireman's carry.
Mm-hmm.
And he had me in a fireman's carry while he was sitting on the top rope.
Okay.
And then he would drop down, and you would basically, as the opponent, would land on the top rope and kind of smack the top rope. Well, unfortunately for me, I ended up crotching the top rope. And let me tell you, I've been kicked in the balls a couple times in my life. I played baseball. I've had the ball hit me in the private parts. Nothing ever compared to this pain of what I felt in that moment. And the worst part was the bruise go up for like 3 or 4 days. But when it did, let me tell you, my whole underside from taint to tip was completely black and blue, like nothing I've ever seen in my life. And so, yeah, that by far is the one that sticks out. I've had some painful things. I've torn, rib from the cartilage on a bad reverse hurricanrana. I've had my face caved in with a kick. I've had some painful bumps, but nothing like that. And you know what? And in this business, you don't get to go timeout. You just gotta suck it up and keep going, And, so yeah, that definitely was the worst by far.
Oh yeah. Well, many moons ago, long time ago in another life, so to speak, I used to be a paramedic. Okay. And I've seen some messed up stuff out there, but yeah, man, what you're describing, I've seen some things like that, but never quite to that extreme.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. I mean, wow.
It was something. I mean, it was to the point where I had to take a picture of it because I've never it looked gnarly, right? Like it was.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
If only the swelling would have stayed, at least I could have got something good out of the deal.
But. So, knowing everything you know now at the age of 47,
yeah.
If you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Man, I'd probably give myself a manual of all this stuff. I don't even know where to start, man. It's I'm someone who's always constantly self-assessing, especially the stuff that I hold the most true. Those are the things that I always want to scrutinize to make sure. I think that maybe the one thing I'd tell myself is don't take it too serious. And I don't just mean wrestling. I just mean life in general. I've experienced, I've done some plant ceremonies when I was in Mexico during my time off from wrestling. I went to do some soul searching, figure out who Daniel was, because Daniel had been spending his whole adult life as this character of Austin Aries in this bubble of professional wrestling that's not real. And the universe conspired, a bit difficult, but it conspired to forcefully spit me out of the pro wrestling bubble because it was self-preservation. I needed it. I needed to go figure out who I was without this. And in that journey, doing some plant medicine ceremonies and experiencing DMT brought me to what I believe is to experience God. And God's a feeling. It's man can't really describe it, but when we actually experience it, we know. And it's the purest form of love and peace I've ever experienced in my life. But it also showed me that, like, what we're all experiencing here, this is like third grade, man. This is third grade. Like none of this, of this is that serious. And we have all these things that we hold on to so tightly, and we take so seriously, right? Our ego and our legacy, and what this person thinks about me, or this mistake I made, or whatever it might be. And this is all we're all here to learn. And one of my favorite quotes from Ram Dass is, "We're all just helping walk each other home." And so, I would tell myself to just relax, take a deep breath, and also realize that everything that you hold true and everything that you've been taught, you're going to come to find out more often than not was bullshit. And so all these truths that we've been programmed to believe, about how the world works, the longer you live, the more you realize is the less you know. And so, yeah, there'd be a lot of things. I think there's a lot of things that anyone who's really done some like self-analysis would probably have a book that they would give to their younger self to teach them. And I know probably in 15 years, I'll have another book of things that I would tell my 47-year-old self that I think I have figured out now, that I'll realize a decade from now, yeah, you didn't quite have it figured out as well as you did. And so that's
absolutely,
I think that's it. And like the other thing too is there is no finish line. A lot of times we put this imaginary like finish line in our mind, like, well, as soon as I reach this, then I'll be happy. As soon as I reach this, then I'll do the thing that I always wanted to do. As soon as I reach here, then I'll feel peace. As soon as I can get this, then I can give that. And you realize at some point, like, there is no end game here. There is no finish line. We're just constantly evolving. We're going to be this perpetual work in motion, perpetually until our last breath. And once you realize there's not some magical destination that you're trying to get to, then you start realizing, I should probably just enjoy the journey instead of being so fixated on the end result, on the finish line.
Absolutely. Well, my friend Eric Black, the guy up in Philly, actually has a question for you.
Shoot.
And that is, if you could redo Bound for Glory against John Hennigan, what would you change?
I wouldn't change anything. The thing I would change had nothing to do with Bound for Glory. Did exactly what I was intended to do. But they offered a contract to me after Bound for Glory. We had been in discussions. My contract was coming up. We met in Las Vegas the following month. They had extended a contract that was for a similar number that I'd already rejected. And if I could change anything, if I go back and change anything, I would have taken that contract. I would have taken that contract just to see the story play out. I had some other things going on in my personal life at the time. I thought I had some other things potentially on the works in my professional life. And those things, just at the time, I decided to pass on the contract that they extended. But I was still willing to work without a contract to kind of do the rematch and finish the story the way that we had intended. And they just chose at that point to move on. Once I didn't sign the contract, they decided that they wanted to move on a different direction. And we never got the final scene. Like, that wasn't intended to be the final scene. The whole psychology behind it was, up to that point, we had so many people believing the magic. They believed that there was this real heat between me and John, or me and Taya. These things that were said on Twitter were so offensive. And we had people believing like there was a real conflict here. And I felt like the decision to make him the champ was kind of a last minute decision. One that I had actually pitched, months before, because I thought it was a good idea. And they decided at the time that they wanted to keep the title on me. And then a couple weeks before, they decided to change it. And so I felt like, man, we're kind of rushing the title change. The TV that we did leading up to the match was with the idea that I was going to retain. So I just had this idea of like, hey, I think we got a lot of steam right now. I think if I have this idea where I kind of leave the match with some controversy and people really thinking like, what the fuck just happened? So that we can do one more rematch and then really, really cement him and crown him as the guy. And that was always the psychology behind it, you know. And unfortunately, because we never had the rematch, a lot of people, you know, believe that I went into business for myself and I was blackballed and all these different things. And so on one hand, that sucks and it hurts because people think I'd be unprofessional or think these terrible things about me. But then, like, the artist in me creatively is like, man, like, that's like some of my finest work. Like, to this day, even though I've come out and done interviews and I've explained this, like, people don't believe it. They still think, like, nope, that was real. He's a prick. And I'm like, well, you know, as an artist, you know, maybe I am that's why I call myself the last real magician of pro wrestling, because people still think my magic's real. And I have to take that as somewhat of a compliment.
Absolutely. You know, the work you've been doing right now in MLW has really been, in my mind, some of the best work of your career, actually. And I know that this Saturday, the 25th, you know, live on YouTube, you've got Mystico in the MLW Opera Cup semifinals.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts about that match and any final words for Mystico?
Well, you know, first, I appreciate what you said, and you know, to be fair, I've been in the ring with some highly talented guys so far with Kushida and Paul London. You know, which makes what I do just that much better when you're in there with guys that are equally as talented. Um, I'll say I'm usually my harshest critic. So for me to say that I've been happy with what I've been able to do so far coming back. You know, as an athlete, as you get older, especially as a pro wrestler who relied on his athleticism, you know, you start to question if you can still go the way you used to go, if you can still do the things you used to do or perform at the level. And, you know, these couple of matches have built some confidence for myself that, you know, I still got some magic left in the bag. And I can still go out there and perform it at the level that I demand of myself, because I do demand that I perform at a high level, or, you know, when I can't do that anymore, I'll just stop doing it. You know, as far as Mystico, I mean, listen, you know, this guy's a legend in his own right. You know, he's, you know, one of the most popular, you know, luchadors in Mexico. He's, you know, he's done a lot of things impactfully here in the States. You know, I don't step in the ring with guys that accomplished that athletic too often. And I know I'm going to be kind of he's going to kind of have the home court advantage, you know. MLW is really focused on Lucha Libre. And with that, you know, that's why they've been selling out all their events, over 1,000 people, all these events. And a lot of them are Lucha Libre fans. And so, you know, it's going to be in Los Angeles. And I know that, you know, he's going to have a lot of the vocal support. You know, my job is to go out there is to make his job as difficult as possible. He's already won one Opera Cup. I want to make sure he doesn't win two. And if you know anything about Austin Aries, if I got to stick my thumb in his eye to make it happen, you know I will.
Absolutely. Wouldn't want it any other way. I mean, so we're getting toward the end of things now. So aside from what's coming up this Saturday, do you have any other upcoming shows or anything at all you'd like to give some hype to?
Yeah, so I'm embarking on a 22 show tour in Canada for CWE, Canada Wrestling Elite. Great company up there. I've worked with before. Danny Duggan, it's a guy that I broke in with. He was breaking in about the same time up in Canada there, Winnipeg, and was like one of the first places I actually went and wrestled out of the country. And so, yeah, I'm doing 22 shows in 22 days from I want to say November 14th until like December 6th. We're gonna be hitting all these different towns in Canada, all these little good, you know, towns that love wrestling. And it's going to be a test. I've never done anything like that. I mean, the WWE, you know, like that schedule is pretty crazy. I've never wrestled 22 straight days in a row. So we'll see what my body feels about me after that. And so I'm looking forward to that. I do have something else coming up that I can't talk about right now. That announcement should be coming up in the next week. And once that's announced, then I'll be, you know, promoting that a little more. But just stay tuned.
Nice.
You know, there's some surprises on the horizon, some things that I haven't done before that I'm looking forward to doing. And but I want to wait for them to make the proper announcement before I hype that up.
Very cool. Very cool. We'll definitely be looking forward to seeing what that is.
Cool.
But as far as what we've got coming up on the Throwdown, tomorrow night, Tuesday the 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern, I've got episode 165, and our guest is going to be a Florida-based wrestler by the name of Destin. He trains at the House of Champions in Orlando, down in your neck of the woods.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
And this kid is absolutely amazing. He's 17 years old, and is really tearing up the indie scene down in Central Florida, and starting to branch out beyond that. And then on Thursday, the 23rd, at also at 7 p.m., I've got episode 166, and our guest is another Florida-based wrestler, GMJ, and he is also one of the assistant coaches at House of Champions. He specializes in the kids classes. So
Yep. These guys
both
look familiar to me.
So, they are, those are the next two, but I'm actually booked up pretty heavily through the better part of November. So, like you were saying, definitely keep an eye on my socials. I try to announce appearances about a week out, but there's definitely some exciting stuff coming down the pike.
Awesome.
And I want to thank you for your time. This has been an absolute treat getting to pick your brain and getting to make your acquaintance. I've really had an absolute blast with this.
Yeah.
And before we wrap this up, do you have any final words?
No, man. Thank you for your time. I appreciate what you're doing. Giving platforms for wrestlers, whether it's old vets like myself or up and coming guys, to get out and talk about their career or just talk about their life. And I think it's cool. The more platforms we can have to help spotlight what we're doing, the better. And you're doing a great thing. And I'm glad we connected through the old Instagram, and we got to share this time
Absolutely.
together. And yep. I'll reiterate the quote I said earlier. We're all just helping walk each other home. So there's a lot of negativity. There can be a lot of negativity online within the wrestling community, or just within, online community in general. And so, just be kind, it's one of the oldest sayings, but treat people the way that you want someone to treat you. And I'll also say this, because I know that, a lot of times as celebrities, people think that we don't have feelings, or that these things don't affect us. And they do. And so if you're someone out there who isn't in the public eye, and you are getting this negativity or this hate that's being spread to you, just always remember that negativity is a reflection of what that person is feeling about themselves. And instead of feeding that negativity, have compassion for that person, because inside they're hurting. Inside there's something broken within them that makes them lash out at other people. Happy people don't spend their time trying to tear other people down. So, it's something that I remind myself when I get a lot of negativity at me, is I try to have compassion for that person, because it's a reflection of something that's going on within them. And then I don't take it personally,
Yep.
And so I just think that, let's amplify the good and let's ignore the bad. Let's feed what we want to see grow.
Absolutely. And for those of you that have been watching this live, thank you. For those of you that'll be seeing this on replays and such on the web, thank you for that. If you like what we've got going here, definitely take the time to do the old like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until tomorrow night at 7 with Destin, be good to each other.